Hello, Kimmerahau is Misha Catherine. Hello, how are you? My name is Catherine. Welcome to this short film called Home, which we hope you will enjoy. In this Scotland's Year of Stories 2022, we thought we would find out what is home. Is it the house you live in? The place you feel safe and secure? Is it the place you return to at Christmas, for holidays, or to visit family? In this project, we hear from people who have come to Easter Ross and found home. First, you will hear their stories in their first language. We may not understand, but we listen. Then we hear their stories again in English, and we listen and understand. For some, English may be their first language, but the words or the accent is foreign to us. But for everyone, this is home.
Hello, my name is Esmeralda Basile. I'm Argentinian by birth and Italian by my grandparents. I'm going to say the story in Spanish and then I'm going to say in English so everybody can understand. Mi nombre es Esmeralda Basile, soy argentina por nacimiento e italiana por mis abuelos. Soy óptica, trabajé y viví en Miami por casi 15 años. En esta charla quiero resaltar hasta qué punto los libros pueden marcar un nuevo rumbo en la vida de las personas. Al fallecer mi esposo cuando vivíamos en Miami, después de una larga enfermedad, retomé el hábito de la lectura. Siempre me gustaron los libros históricos románticos, los cuales casi todos se trataban de Escocia y describían muy bellos lugares. Mi curiosidad por saber si esos lugares eran tan bellos realmente, con ayuda de Google Maps, organicé un recorrido de 10 días por Escocia, tratando de visitar la mayor cantidad posible de castillos. Al mismo tiempo que organizaba mi recorrido por Escocia, leí un libro llamado Maitland y San Martín, escrito por un historiador argentino que hizo sus investigaciones en Edimburgo. En este libro muestra la extraordinaria similitud del plan concebido por el militar y estratega Thomas Maitland con la campaña libertadora llevada a cabo por nuestro libertador, General San Martín. San Martín había luchado en España contra Napoleón junto al cuarto conde de Fife, James Duff, con el que hizo gran amistad. La intención de Gran Bretaña era libertar Sudamérica, que era una colonia española, para que no quedara bajo dominio de Napoleón. Este historiador examinó las razones por las cuales es probable que San Martín haya conocido el plan debido a sus relaciones masónicas, su amistad con James Duff y demás oficiales escoceses. Gracias a este libro descubrí qué importante conexión hubo entre Escocia y Argentina. Por este motivo agregué a mi recorrido una visita a Dove House para conocer al que fuera tan amigo y anfitrión de nuestro libertador General San Martín. Para finalizar, quiero decir que gracias a los libros mi vida tuvo un cambio de rumbo y mi sueño de ver castillos se hizo realidad. Al hospedarme en el Mansfield Castle Hotel durante mi viaje, conocí a su dueño, John Shearer, quien es mi pareja desde hace casi 9 años. I'm an optician. I work and live in Miami for almost 15 years. In this talk, I want to highlight to what extent books can influence a new course in a person's life. Everybody asks me how I came to Scotland. When I was in Miami and my husband died after a long illness, then I resumed the habit of reading. I always liked historic and romantic novels. For that reason, almost all books were about Scotland, in which they describe beautiful places. My curiosity to know if all those places were really so beautiful, with help of Google Maps, I organized a 10-day tour around Scotland, trying to visit castles as much as I could. At the same time, I read a book titled Maitland and San Martín, written by an Argentinian historian who did his research in Edinburgh. In this book shows the extraordinary similarity of the plan conceived by the military strategist Thomas Maitland with the liberating campaign was carried out by our liberator General San Martín. San Martín had fought in Spain against Napoleon, together with the 4th Earl of Fife, James Duff, with whom he made a great friendship. The intention of Great Britain was free South America, which was a Spanish colony, so that it would not be under Napoleon domination. These historians examine the reason why it is likely that San Martin knew about the plan due to his Masonic connections, his friendship with James Duff, and other Scottish officers. Since this book, I discovered how important connection there is between Scotland and Argentina. For this reason, I added a visit to Duthac house to my tour, to meet the person who was such a friend and host of our liberator, General San Martin, when he was in Scotland. To finish, I want to say that thanks to books, my life had a change of course and my dreams of seeing castles came true. While staying at Mansfield Castle Hotel in Tain during my trip, I met John, who owns the Morency and Mansfield Hotel, who has been my partner for almost 9 years.
My name is Christina Fleming. I married a Scotsman here from the Highlands, so I figured I should probably move in with him at some point. We actually met online years ago. We can track back our first tweet to each other in 2009, and we had mutual interests: roller derby, racing, auto racing, different things. And we just had a group of people that would tweet together constantly, daily. And years later, I decided that Twitter wasn't for me anymore, and I left Twitter, but his Instagram handle was the same as it was on Twitter. And he's not a photographer, but he's excellent at photography. And he's really cheeky in his captions, and so I was enraptured by that. And so we followed each other on Instagram and would talk and reply to comments on photos. And one day he had posted a photo of him and another woman, and I remember being a little bit disappointed because I was like, oh, he's married. And we had never had conversations like that, but I think in my head I was quite enamored with the photography of Scotland that he would share. And years later, 2016, so from 2009 to 2016, he'd sent me a message privately on Instagram. And it wasn't naughty or anything. It was a bit cheeky though, and I remember being kind of put off by it. And my reply to him was, how does your wife feel about that? And at the time I didn't realize, he told me later on, he was mortified to get that message back, because his reply to me was that he wasn't married and never had been. And I remember thinking, that changed like the whole dynamic of the conversations that we had had from up to that point. And it kind of progressed from there, sort of as it naturally would. We started talking and video chatting on Skype, and this went on for a few months. Meanwhile, my friends and I had been watching a show many have heard of called Outlander, and I was talking to Ewan about that one day, and it was so adorable. He started watching the show. He wanted to tell us if it was historically accurate, and he started visiting the places in the show to be able to tell us whether they were, worth our time. We were planning a trip, basically, an Outlander trip. So he started watching the show and telling us which places to visit or not waste our time. We were having a conversation one day, and I had mentioned to him that my bucket list included Hogmanay and being able to see the fireworks over Edinburgh Castle. And he invited me. He said, maybe the first time we meet shouldn't be with a whole group of your friends. Maybe we should just spend some time together, and you should come for Hogmanay New Year and just hang out, and we'll see some of Scotland. And so I did. At the time, I guess I don't know what I was thinking. I'd never met him in person, but I felt like I knew who he was. So I came for New Year and Hogmanay, and we had a great time. And a couple months later, he came to visit me in the States and met my family and my friends. And at the end of that trip, we had decided that we definitely wanted our relationship to progress. And so we challenged each other to put a pro and con list, pros and cons of staying in the States, or pros and cons of moving to Scotland. And actually him coming to the States won, but on paper it made sense for me to come here. And so I did. So fast forward a few months after we had decided that I would move to Scotland, and I arrived in August 2018 with my cat. That's a whole story in and of itself. And at some point, due to, visa reasons, you can't stay forever unless you have the right visas. And so I had to return to the States. But prior to that, about a month prior, he'd asked me to marry him, and I'd said yes. But we knew that on a visitor visa you can't get married in either country. It's the same rules in the States as it is here in Scotland. So we had to figure out what the solution was going to be. But we decided we would figure that out later. I had to go back to the States, and a couple months later, in the summer of 2019, he came to visit in the States. So we took a drive, went to New York to cross over into Canada, and we stopped at a souvenir shop right before you cross the bridge in New York into Canada. And we were walking around the shop, and he had disappeared at some point, and I was wondering where he'd gone. And I caught up with him talking to the store owner and the clerk, and they were asking him questions about himself, and at some point asked, well, when are you getting married? And I remember he looked at me sort of, we haven't really decided, and said, we should get married in Canada. Later on, we'd gotten into Canada and we'd gone to dinner. And during dinner, it struck me that he had asked me earlier or made that comment about getting married in Canada. And so I Googled it. And we're sitting there and I'm going through the list and I'm like, babe, do you have your driver license on you? He's like, why? I'm like, oh, nothing. And I keep going through the list and realize that we both had on us all of the documentation that we would need. And so I told him, I said, according to the website, you can get married in Canada if we have all of this documentation. And he goes, okay, let's do it. And the next morning we went to the courthouse in Ontario at Niagara Falls and applied for our marriage license. And we went and got married in sort of a wedding storefront in Canada, and took about 4.5 minutes. We had witnesses we had never met till right before the wedding, sort of a shake your hand, thank you. She provided them, it was great. And we got married. And then we realized we should probably tell our family. So we drove along a ways, a couple of hours, and stopped for a coffee, and we called our family together on camera and said, hi, you're speaking to Mr. and Mrs. Fleming, and yeah, it all went from there. And then at some point I went through the visa process, and now I'm permanently in Scotland, officially.
Hello, it's Misha Hamish, agus bhuaigh mé turban í Australia. Is stácha go bhfuil smyrniche go bhfuil mé smyrniche go a dheachaí Australia, bíú ceá. Glúis mí go cildrí fasca bailagúig na bheith mé déich mé sin a gur, agus seáfáil bhfuil mé bhí a fullach bhfuil an uair sin. Mar sin, is stácha go bhfuil smyrniche go bhfuil mé smyrniche go le dheachaí alaba, ach bíú ceá a rís. Leis go bhfuil mé smyrniche go dheachaí mar an Szulc, Fanis, an clúine care, bailach atche, agus íon bailach atche. Hello, my name is Hamish, and I was born in Subiaco, Western Australia. You might think that I think home is Australia. You'd be wrong. I moved to Kildare near Tame when I was 10 months old, and this is where I have lived ever since. So you might think that I think of home as Kildare, but you would be wrong again, because I think of home as the world, space, the universe, more space, and even more space.
Hello, I'm Tanya McAmlotty, Hammy Jake Bliana Gash, Brookig Mianan Innernish, Stolum Trapeze Dollar Curse Gymnastics, Agus Nav, Agus Stolum Homer Skas Hatrapeze, Agus Bar Gymnastics a Yarigakam, Agus Stolum na Behan Agus and Try. Hi, my name is Lottie. I am 10 years old. I was born in Inverness. I like doing trapeze, gymnastics, and swimming, and I really like home because I have a trapeze and a gymnastic bar in my garden, and I like the mountains and the sea.
I was born, bred and buttered in Easter Ross. My roots go deep. Here we have a rich language peppered with words which are Gaelic, Scots, Scandinavian. Some words are so particular to this part of Ross-shire that people who live just a few miles away don't know them. Shall I tell you a short story? I stopped for a blether with an old bodach who was picking up doorkins in his garden. Come in for a blether and a stroopach, he said. Aye. It's half yoking, I said. Right enough. And I went in. Inside was a right boorach. Oh, you could stir that room with a spurtle. But soon I was sitting down with a doorstep piece and jam and tea that you could stand your spoon up in. Do you mind John Manny? He said, handing me a photo. Mind he got his jotters? Huh, he was a right gadgikoff. And he was off. Soon we had tales of bodachs with by names, biddies who had gone doolally, lugs, nebs, oxters and Dawsons, tales of wee Watty, Teeny, Tootsie and Burler filled the afternoon, finally. Oh, had you wished? I laughed. I'm meant to be getting the messages, and it looks quite dreich out there. I'm going to get drooked. Cheerio. I stopped for a chat with an old man who was picking up pine cones in his garden. Here, come in for a chat and a cup of tea, he said. I glanced at my watch. Aye, it's break time indeed. And in I went. Inside was very untidy. You could have stirred it with a spoon. But soon I was sitting with a thick slice of bread and jam and a cup of very strong tea. Do you remember this fellow? He said, handing me a photograph. Remember, he got the sack from his work. He was a right dodgy character. Soon we were talking of old men with nicknames, old women who had lost the plot, ears, noses and armpits, and fringes, local characters like Wee Watty, Teeny, Tootsie and Burler filled that afternoon, finally. Oh, be quiet, I laughed. I'm meant to be buying the shopping. It's gonna rain. I'm gonna get drooked. Cheerio.
I really enjoyed taking part in this video called Home. I hope you enjoyed what was put together. It was very insightful to see what other people considered home. Thank you.
Myślę, że się Wam spodobało nasze wideo, co się nazywa Dom. Myślę, że też się Wam spodobało, co właśnie stworzyliśmy. Bardzo mi otworzyło oczy, co inni ludzie myślą o swoim domu. Dziękuję.